So at this point, you should have an object selected. Hopefully, we talked on email, and um, it's time to start. Well, get started. We got to recreate this object in wire form, and you should have your double wire twisted up, and that's what we're going to be using at the beginning here. So before we get started in the wire, first we got to draw. So let's say you have a seashell. You want to do at least 3 drawings from different views. So you can think about the Cartesian coordinates, XYZ, all those kind of things. But, or you can think about like mug shots and stuff. But I have a front, what I decided is my front view here. So I'm looking at the shell, and this is a normal line drawing. There's a heavy outline, pretty much. We got some contours, and then we're getting some of these cross contour lines that are showing the form. So if you can't tell, it's a spiral, kind of a conch seashell. And here's the opening, and these lines are showing that this outside form wraps inside, and that this is this opening, this mouth. And I like to call it an ear because it looks like an ear to me. So fairly detailed little line drawing, paying attention to line weight, right? We get a top view. You can see all the line work here. I'm starting to capture detail surfaces. And this kind of line drawing, the more intuitive kind that we're doing, representing an object and, sketching. These spots and everything, even though they're just surface details and maybe not quite three-dimensional on the surface, they're important because they can come into play as identifiers for that object that relates to that specific form. When it comes to finish, or even when you're filling in wire, you might have a thicker wire structure and then you start to bring in the thin wire, but instead of just going straight across in places, it might come and have spots where these bump spots or patterns, you can see this kind of wave pattern going across, and then there's physical ripples exist. So, and remember, think about too, as you draw, at this point it's starting to get a little confusing as the form. Think about your line weight. Right, if we come back through and go sideways and kind of emphasize some of these forms so we can get a better idea of the structure, right? We end up organizing the composition a little bit to better see visually what we're looking at, right? So this is the top view, and I still feel like this is kind of messy. It just looks like a weird spiral tornado flower thing. So I'm adding little notes, right? This is going into the opening, so into this mouth or ear cavity, but looking from above. I'm also noticing that the opening, if you were to travel in, it wraps around, and from a top view, that's counterclockwise, right? From below, which is kind of what we're looking at now, it's clockwise. So for top view, here's the opening, we're wrapping around. That way when I go to make the structure, I can mimic that. The more information, the more prepared we are. And this is a smaller sketch with a lot less detail of the opposite view of that, right? So what's that backside view? So what does the transition from this outside of this ear mouth over here look like as it comes around before it gets to this inner part and wraps in? All right. So for your email that you're going to end up sending me today in class, or by the end of the day, your classwork for today is to do these drawings. So I want you to do 3 line drawings. Think about line weight, think about surface detail, think about these cross contours, right? What's going to describe that form, that surface? As we move forward from this, you want to start breaking down how you might construct this piece. So there's different ways to do that. One way is to identify three-dimensional forms and shapes. So with this, there's a cone form in here for sure. I think that's something. And how you might think about how you naturally start to break it down. If you have to come up with a plan, what's that? What is that? What is that going to be? How is your brain breaking it down? You know, from a top view, we're dealing with circles basically, and specifically a spiral. It's the opposite wave. But so circles, cones. The problem with this, it's important to identify these forms and shapes, right? But you can't oversimplify things. So if I go and in wire, this is what a lot of people do. Make a nice big sphere, a circle. And I'm like, all right, this thing's basically a cone. So I'm going to start out that way. And you might think that way, especially if you ever followed any of those draw it yourself books when you were a kid that break everything down into shapes, but then you end up working over them, right? Maybe erasing, or the line work just covers it up. The problem with wire is it's there, so unless you want to cut a bunch of wires out later, you're stuck. So we have a circle. We maybe taken a long wire, bent it, came back and connected. Now we're going to need one from the back coming down and then back to the front connected. So this is making a cone. Well, now these wires are all loose, so I might add another rib in here to give it a little bit more structure. Now we have a solid wire cone all tied and connected up, right? Okay, now what's the next part? We could then put this opening, this ear type thing, right? This on here, and then we could end up maybe connecting these back. This is going behind the form, right, to kind of create this opening. So this is an open space in here. And then I could maybe build a spiral form that goes with that shape, and then start to make connections along the way here. Right, so this could work out. Starting to simplify it, then you're adding cones. Okay. The only thing is, a lot of times you end up adding extra pieces that you might not need. Another thing is, this gives the deception that maybe this is going and wrapping around, and that's important to the piece, but you could do that other ways too, right? So that's one way, starting to break it down. The problem is, a lot of times people make that cone, that Christmas tree shape, and they're not paying attention to all the specific shapes, contours, edges, and everything like that. So you get that, and they end up with this shell form, which looks like a shell. It just doesn't really look like their shell, right? So sometimes you can take that and then just bend the wire a little bit, add a shape. So anyway, so this is a way to work. It has issues that come into play, but you could figure it out. So that's another thing I want you to do. Identify the shapes. Now, the three-dimensional forms, cylinder, I guess you could say spheres, honestly, but anyway, so kind of break it down into more simplified block form. So that's one way to process it, think about it. Another way is to start to take cross-cut views, and you can think of silhouettes too. So when you think of silhouette, you might be thinking of a person. This also goes back to like incarceration photos, right? So you might think about a human form. I don't know, right? So profile view, I'm just doing it quick. Then you might have the front view. I'm just going to do really small here. Right, that's supposed to be ear. Front view, back view is about the same. Top view. Right, something like that. So you have these bad sketches. But anyway, so you have these different forms, these different silhouettes looking from different angles. Similar thing here. But using those specific shapes, can you break things down and then start to make something, right? So if you make this wire form and these proportions of these bends and everything look right, now you want to come back and make this shape. You got to make sure that this distance is going to be the same, not from here to here, but actually, because what you're seeing is the bottom of the chin and the highest point of the head, right? And if you're going to include these ears in there, you have to think about their placement right back here somewhere. So that form, you know, it can't just go straight down. It's going to have problems, so it actually needs to travel back. And maybe the ear needs to bend out, so you might want to start to build it on the wire form and then come up and then come back and do the same thing on the other side. So anyway, right, so a similar way to think about it is if, let's say, you're making a dolphin or something. You could make, I actually don't, I can't even think about what a dolphin shape really is like. Right, something like that. Side view, you make the one shape, now you have something to build from. Again, don't oversimplify things. Are dolphins perfectly round? I don't know. We can make a sphere, a circle that's the same width as this spot to here. Tie it on. That can always get bent out of shape a little bit. That's starting to give it form. But we're going to need those drawings. We're going to need the top view drawing too of what a dolphin looks like, right? So whatever that is becomes this shape that connects and goes back, right? And then same on the other side. Oops, it's the other fin. Connects. So it starts to make a 3D form. Start to cross sections. See, we're already starting to see the three-dimensional dolphin, right? This, it's going to be a little rounded in the front probably. It's connected, comes back, connects, right? Even this has space inside of it. Side fins, same thing, whatever they look like. So, and this is what, in the end, we're after. Maybe an idea of where the eye is. Right, so, and at some point, you're going to get all in double wire, a form kind of like this made. And then we'll be able to go back in single wire and decide how we want to fill those surfaces in, right? However that's going to be. All right, so breaking things down. If you were doing a dinosaur, a long neck dinosaur, all right, there's my long neck dinosaur. You can't take the full silhouette as that cross section. You have to think about what's in the middle. So in the middle, these legs are on both sides, right? So really, the middle cross section might be something more like that tail, like that. And then we start to build that out, thinking about those forms. That's why you need the actual object, so you can look down and see. You know, it's not going to be circles. It's not. These aren't plush. Well, some people are doing something like that, but and then you're going to come back and find the other forms for those legs, right? Whatever they are, and start to find ways to complete these form shapes. So, kind of breaking it down to outside contours, outlines, elements like that. One way to work. And you got to think about their placement three-dimensionally. Also think about these kind of forms. So I want you to do at least 3 sketches that are nice and detailed. Break things down into more three-dimensional blocks, simplified things. And then I want you to think about 3 silhouettes, cross sections, and somewhere in there I should see some drawings that resemble a kind of idea, a breakdown, a plan of how you're going to construct that in double wire. Also, as far as the proportions, again, we're taking different measurements. Like I can see, oh, from the top here to there, maybe that's the same measurement from the top to the most outside part here, right? And that's just ways, finding ways of checking your work, right? Or the width of the top here, I can hold my pen, see that it comes to the plus sign from here to there, All right, now I can see how many of those is the distance, and it's 1 2/3. So the distance from here to here is 1 2/3 distance from here to here. So if that measurement's A. All right, so anyway, you don't have to write it down confusing like that, but starting to recognize those proportional relationships is what's going to make this seem more realistic, and that's where you have to nail it, getting this initial skeletal armature system down. That's where the proportions really matter. Once this is made, you can Netflix it out, zone out to really fill in the surface if you already have enough structure there. All right. Another thing to avoid, real quick, the seashell. Historically, when we've done this, some people want to do, create an anchor of some point, some thinking about an armature, but remember, we can see through this. Whatever you put in the middle is going to matter. So some people take a wire, put it right in the middle, and then start to build their seashell form off of that. And you get this thing, and it looks like a seashell, but in the end, you always have this stem in the middle that totally destroys and breaks and takes away from the form. Right? So think about that. We can't treat it exactly like building a house or something. You can't put bones in there that we're going to hide later. So think about this. Your homework is by the end of the day to have these drawings done by tomorrow, like noon, hopefully at the latest. Tomorrow evening at the latest. Because then I can give you any feedback on your plans for construction before you get started, and hopefully maybe save some of you some struggles and agony. And this is the goal this week, is to make a rough skeletal structure at a double wire. Not everyone's gonna make it, but this is what we're shooting for. Hopefully this was helpful. Sorry it's long-winded. And email me with any questions. Definitely email me with these drawings and let me know what's up.